How does this work? It's interesting drawing yourself because you feel like the physical tension of holding still. There's a form of strength training that you resist your forward motion. So if you want to stand still, you kind of have to consciously fight against your own forward movement or your own. If someone was pushing your chest and you were leaning forward, you would have a constant stream of energy that you're like putting into the person who's pushing you forward. Or even if you're modeling for someone else and you need to hold still, a lot of times you'll have to consciously maintain the shapes that are in your body, which takes a lot of energy. So there's that tension that happens that you kind of feel as you're drawing, which you physically feel where the weight of the feet is laying and where the torque is pressing and how the gesture you don't need to see the gesture to understand it because you're doing it. They're like these straight white metal bars. It lets me frame the feet and have something to measure against to understand where each of the toes and the different planes sit in relationship to the bed and all of this like kind of vague organic information. If you took sand and dropped it over like any form, but like specifically like feet and fruit, if you took sand and dropped it over these like skinned forms, the sand would fall in a gradation. It would be like most compact at the point of entry, and then just like light, it disperses as it goes around. With the human figure, there's kind of this very soft gradation that happens. Every form is convex. There are no like harsh concave cutouts of the human form, unless you have like an actual scar at the edge of a fingernail. But like on skin, it's a pretty gradual curve. It's a gradual fade. So you do have these like high impact points of light, and then you have these like falling shadows. And usually the shadows fall to where the weight is, or where maybe you can find some ephemera, some space for you to lose clarity. Some people find it easier to work reductively for that reason. So like say you have a vine charcoal or something, you could kind of block out the shadows and maybe give everything an even middle tone, and then go in with an eraser and kind of cut out some of the highlights and some of the midtones, and it'll let you blend more that way. Working with mechanical pencil and pen, you're left to kind of this mix of linear drawing and some like really inconsistent shading. The only reason it's inconsistent in the drawings that I show tends to be because I don't put as much time into them as would be required to like quality check that consistency. If you're looking for a certain level of quality or finish to your drawing, you'll have a different experience with why you're showing the work and why you're taking that time out of your day to draw. All the same principles apply whatever level of finish you get to. So you're starting off with a series of measurements that let you find the space, that let you kind of search for where everything is and put it in its place and see how those different objects and subjects relate to each other, and how can you. One thing I always look for, especially when I'm doing the figure, is where am I looking at something of the same world, or like where am I looking at something that can I make two separate subjects, like two separate objects in my drawing become one and still have it work spatially, or still define those as separate objects some other way. So like the foot on the right, the baby toe, the shadow there just kind of blends right into the blanket shadow. I used the same strokes, just went straight over the two. But because of context and measurements and proportions, you're mind can kind of fill in the blank there. And what that does help is it brings forward, it like enforces the torque of that foot. It enforces the turn. You can often find places where maybe a part of the body blends in with the background. You might even be able to see it in the video camera footage of me. Like, there are certain values in my skin that as I get closer to the light, maybe they become almost synonymous with the blue background. Are there different decisions you can make about what is the same and what's different that would change the way we perceive your subject? One thing when I'm drawing feet, and this goes for the whole body too, one of the first things I think about is what are the shapes doing to each other? So especially pairs. So if I were drawing both hands, I'd want to think about like how do they fold around the object or the other parts of the drawing. So how does this, on Instagram I called this drawing vase, because it has that kind of vase shape. To get that shape, a lot of times I'll think of these forms in flat, like planar relationships. So I'll think about almost like if you took a piece of cardboard and folded it to fit the gesture of these feet. And when I say gesture, I just mean like what do you think of when you hear gesture? It's like, hello, the way your body interacts with the world to convey a message. I always tell my students to think of a verb, or to think of what the objects or the visual elements, so like the different parts of the image, what are they doing? Are they falling? Are they sliding? Are they turning? And you can name this word whatever you want, but it will help you to stay consistent, to know what the drawing is about. So with self-portraiture, which this is kind of a self-portrait because it's my feet, it's a part of me, it's an appendage. What does it reflect about you when you're making a drawing or thinking about those verbs or that idea? What do you see when you do this? So I saw my feet, which I don't particularly put a lot of thought into my feet. You start to develop an understanding of your drawing that maybe no one else will have from the outside. I have this like strong plane on the top of my foot that is almost parallel to the middle knuckle, and like these types of relationships that maybe they mean a lot more to you than, like, I don't think I'd think that in depth about, like, I wouldn't acknowledge these relationships on someone else's foot. But for me, this is like not often that you get this level of introspection. There's something about the self-confidence you can gain from being able to like look at yourself completely objectively and say, I'm gonna draw me, like these feet, they're mine, but like while I'm looking at them there's a little level of self-consciousness, and then as I'm drawing, like when I start measuring it's like far less important to me what I think of my feet as it is where is the middle toe in relationship to the wall outlet, and I like sometimes it'll like creep back in. You'll be like, why is my like big toe so long? At least for me, it takes a lot of energy to represent something. It's different than a camera where you see an instant replica of yourself, except you have to edit it for Instagram or something. Whereas like a drawing, you're drawing what you see, and you see what you're drawing, and when you finish the drawing, I guarantee you'll feel accomplished. You might have thoughts later, but that is a long period of time that you get to spend with yourself, completely uncritically. Let me know how you feel about that. This is an interesting conversation, I think. Do you draw from life often? Do you draw yourself? I think a lot of us like to sketch people, to think about the human form, because it's something we all know, like, really intimately. because we are human, I assume. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to figurative drawing. I am working on one right now. It's actually behind me. There's something to be said about contemporary like yoga practices or fighting and sports and things like that. There's so much that we use our body for that it's kind of an innate part of our human fascination. If you start playing around seeing the way people's shoulders sit, how does the line from one shoulder to another relate to the line between their hips? If you're just like on a train or something, just like look at those types of relationships and see where else you can find those kind of intricacies. One thing that I got really excited about was the palm of the foot, or like the like meaty part underneath the big toe, and how that line, that angle, was almost parallel to the ball of my left foot. That type of relationship is visually what excites me about figures. So thanks for watching, and I will be back soon. Subscribe if you haven't, and check out my Instagram. The link's in the description below. All right, thank you.